Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. I normally don't use my platform to talk about sports related stuff, but I gotta do it at this point because this is just, I gotta give my 2 cents here. So, for those of you who don't know, Stephen A. Smith and LeBron James have been having somewhat of a Cold War, very similar to that of the years long subliminal back and forth between Kendrick and Drake, which ultimately exploded in the probably the greatest hip hop battle of all time last summer. Well, not too long ago, the silent feud between Stephen A. Smith and LeBron, it finally culminated in this very viral moment that went out where LeBron approached Stephen A. literally in the middle of a basketball game to tell him to not speak about his son. And obviously, that became a big talk, it became a big conversation. And it then kind of migrated over into this recent interview that LeBron did with Pat McAfee about 2 days ago, where he kind of just touches on the Stephen A topic and probably spent less than 10 minutes talking about the entire Stephen A situation. He probably spent about 5 minutes talking about it. And then from that conversation that he had with Pat McAfee, which I'm sure LeBron knew this was going to happen because he's, as Brian Windhorst says, he's very aware. Stephen A. then went and took that Pat McAfee segment, and between his, Stephen A. Smith show, between ESPN First Take, and everything in between, Stephen A. Smith has probably spent at least an hour and a half of on-air time talking about LeBron. And I find this whole thing very funny for a number of reasons. LeBron literally gave Stephen A. Smith 5 minutes in an interview, and probably even less than that during their face-to-face confrontation. So in all reality, LeBron has probably given Stephen A. Smith a total of 10 minutes of time and attention. And Stephen A. Smith has now taken the 10 minutes of time that LeBron has given him and dedicated entire podcasts and shows and segments and all these different things to LeBron James, talking about LeBron as though he's actually playing basketball against LeBron, like as if he and LeBron are direct competitors when they're absolutely not. And I saw this take. I saw Stephen A. Smith's take, and I'm listening to him talk, and it's honestly getting to a point where Stephen A. Smith, in my opinion, is showing someone like me how much he needs LeBron for views and ratings. Because I could tell you what, if let me think, if like I'm just trying to think of if Quentin Grimes were to have said something to Stephen A. Smith and approached Stephen A. Smith would not have dedicated this much time, attention, and energy towards it. But because it's LeBron, he's milking the moment for all it's worth. He's gonna milk it and get as many views as he wants. And in my opinion, I don't think Stephen A is as important to LeBron and NBA fans as he thinks he is. Stephen A. Smith talks to the public as though he's like an actual player of the game. And I understand everything that he's done in media. I understand how much of a role he's played in media, and I understand that he is probably the GOAT in terms of basketball sports media, right? But I don't think that he has that position because he's necessarily the best. I think personally that there have been people that could have done a better job or as good of a job covering basketball media, just as captivating, just as they could have added, probably not as sensationalized as he is with it. But I think there have been other commentators that could do just as good of a job. But the reason why a lot of those commentators never stuck around is because they eventually move on to get actual jobs in the NBA. Either they become coaches, assistant coaches, head coaches, they become front office personnel and executives. Usually the people that cover the NBA who are very smart when it comes to and I'm not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not just talking about JJ Redick. Because a lot of people are going to say, a lot of people are going to attribute JJ Redick's um, ability to become the head coach of the Lakers, they're going to attribute that to LeBron. But another example you could think of is like David Griffin. David Griffin was a commentator for a long time on NBA TV, on ESPN, and then he eventually took a front office position with the Pelicans. You've got Bob Myers, who worked with the Warriors. And a lot of the commentators that are around Stephen A. Smith, in my opinion, they are they could do a better job of reporting and analyzing the game. And in fact, in my opinion, they are better at reporting and analyzing the game, which is why many of them, even some who did not play the game, ultimately wind up getting front office positions, head coaching positions, and different positions like that. And so, again, I Stephen A takes, I think he feels like he has the authority to speak on certain things because of what he's done from the standpoint of a media personality. But his knowledge has never been transcendent enough for him to, I don't think he could actually have a job in the NBA, neither in a front office, on an advisory board, and a coaching staff. And for as long as he's covering the league, that would just never happen. His specialty is journalism. His specialty is sensationalism. That's what he's good at. And I think that's why he's milking this moment for as much as he can milk it for. But the segment that I saw today with him, Kendrick Perkins, and Wendy felt very, it lacked masculinity, in my opinion. I think their comeback at LeBron for the things that LeBron said on the Pat McAfee show, it makes him look worse. And I think ultimately he's going to be ridiculed and scorned for it more than he's going to be uh, validated. I don't think the internet is going to validate Stephen A as much as he thinks they will, because it gets to a point where you start to look at who's saying what on both sides, and when one guy is talking about it for 5 minutes and you're talking about it for literally hours, clearly you're the more affected party here. You care about it a lot more here. You need to talk about it because you need the attention, you need the publicity, you need the promo. And really, it doesn't help. They're trying to, it almost feels like they're trying to create this smear campaign, even making it a thing about race. I was really disappointed when I heard Kendrick Perkins ask LeBron why he chose Steve Nash as the next co-host for his next season of Mind the Game, and he didn't choose people like Richard Jefferson or Channing Frye or Phil Handy or, I don't know, I can't even remember all these people that he mentioned. First of all, a lot of the people that Kendrick Perkins listed off, they're busy. They actually have like busier things going on. Richard Jefferson is getting ready to call the NBA Finals probably. He's probably focused on that and working with Mike Breen to get ready to call the NBA Finals. Phil Handy's probably off doing his own thing. I can't even remember some of the other people that he mentioned, but these are people who actually like have full-time jobs, like full-time gigs. They're not just media personalities. When I look at some of these media personalities, it seems like they have extra time to do stuff. That's why Shannon Sharp he has his little segment on First Take, but he also does the nightcap. Stephen A, even though he's doing First Take and he spends a lot of time doing that, he's also doing his own show on the side. They have the bandwidth to do those things. I don't think that for the guys that Kendrick Perkins mentioned, or asked LeBron why he didn't choose them to be his co-host, perhaps those people don't have the bandwidth. You don't know who LeBron asked or didn't ask to join his second season of Mind the Game. And even if he didn't ask those guys, it's a crime for him to ask Steve Nash. I don't know. The whole segment and all of it is starting to become, they're making it very soap opera-ish. And at first it was funny. At first it was like, oh, look at what's going on between LeBron and Stephen A. But the segment that they just came out with this morning between Stephen A. And Kendrick Perkins and Brian Windhorst felt very soap opera-ish, with the exception of Wendy. I felt like, and if anyone had a reason to be like really offended, in my opinion, probably outside of Stephen A, is really Wendy. Like Wendy probably has the most reason to be like, okay, well, this guy kind of just alluded to the fact that I'm a weirdo, even though LeBron never called Brian Windhorst a weirdo in the interview. He just said that these guys are weird. Now, maybe he was talking about Brian Windhorst, maybe he wasn't. But even with all that being said, Brian Windhorst still made very objective, balanced comments regarding the entire situation. And I think Brian Windhorst, he does a good job of straddling that line. I think he does a good job of trying to remain as objective as possible. Um, but the whole thing is just funny. I think Stephen A. and Kendrick Perkins kind of just exposed themselves a little bit with this whole take. And if you haven't seen it, go look it up. I'm sure it's on ESPN. I'm sure it's somewhere on YouTube. Go find it. But this whole thing is just absolutely stupid. I know a lot of you guys that follow me, a lot of you guys that follow the channel, you do follow sports, you follow basketball, so I know you get it. I know a lot of you probably don't, and you probably don't care about the NBA, you probably won't. But I just kind of wanted to use my platform, this platform, just to express my thoughts on this, because I think it's just hilarious, and I am an NBA fan. Clearly, I'm a Jordan fan. I've got some Jordan 5s right here. So, I don't care who you say the GOAT is. I think that whole GOAT argument is like stupid. I feel like it's stupid. Some people have Carmelo Anthony as their GOAT. That's going to be purely subjective. But let me know what you think about the whole situation. If you're following it, if you're not, you can just keep on scrolling, disregard this video. But if you are tapped in and if you are keeping up with this whole Stephen A. Smith, LeBron, Pat McAfee situation, let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.